right, thanks for joining us with ExGarage. Jake and Heath here. Gospel Battle Cry, I forgot that one. ExGarage, Gospel Battle Cry. We should probably describe that. Like, what does that mean, Heath?
Yeah, ExGarage.
ExGarage.
Yeah. It initially, it's a Greek word. That's not how it's pronounced, though. It's exgarazio, and it means to redeem. It's from, what's that, Ephesians 5 something. But it comes from Ephesians, where it talks of redeeming the time for the days because the days are evil. And so that word to redeem is exgarazio, or I might be a little off there, but and when Jake the snake heard it, he said, "It sounds like you're saying ExGarage," and I said, "That's just as good. Probably what it did sound like." So yeah, it means to redeem the time, and we felt that's a great title for something where we're trying to redeem the time.
Awesome. Yeah. Cool. Well, we missed some stuff that we were looking at on the last episode. So take us off, Heath. Where were we at? Yeah,
we didn't quite finish theology.
Okay.
We didn't even start it. So we'll do that. We'll do theology. Then we're going to do, what are the other ones here? We have, right here, point 3, anthropology and ethics is what we're going to do.
Cool.
On this segment. But we'll start back up on theology proper, which is just the study of God himself, right? And Scientology, again, if you go to their site, they're very clear on it that, well, I mean, as clear as they can be. It says God is, divinity is what they would call infinity. And they wouldn't conceptualize it as a personal God. They as they would state, it's eternality. It's this existence. Don't really define it other than that it's the urge within all of us.
So
as thetans.
In an interview that Ron was in, I think this was actually in England. He was asking, do you believe in the same kind of? He has a very funny voice for you guys who haven't heard him, but he has this kind of low, kind of almost lispy sort of sound.
That sounds good.
And when they asked him, like, do you believe in most normal morality? Like, oh yes, we believe in the same sort of things. And they got to ask him about God, and they're like, do you believe in God? And he's like, oh yes, we believe in God. And the peculiar thing about Scientology is that you end up discovering your own participation in creation.
Oh wow!
Yeah, like there is a sense in which the individual takes part. I mean, God is a part of the individual. So you mentioned pantheism. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I'm trying to find the quote I had off this site. I think before we get into that, I do want to mention this. Off the Scientology.org, it says, unlike religions with Judeo-Christian origins, the Church of Scientology has no set dogma concerning God that it imposes on its members. But according to their beliefs, it really isn't true. Again, because infinity is the term they use for the concept of God, which early on in Dianetics, it seems as if Hubbard was saying that using the scientific method in terms of observing cultures, that every culture has a notion of God. And so you extract that notion out, that's what we all share. We need that in our system of belief, because we find also that people who share the concept of God are more moral people. Therefore, we're going to hold that in our worldview. So really, it's more of a practical, as you mentioned a moment ago, not on our recording, but it's like a practical theology, using God for the sake of our own
practical
ends.
Theism.
Yeah. And so, but with that said, infinity is that, when it's further defined, is the, again, I kind of press this, is you and I as thetans, and as spirits, our spiritual personhood, that is one with infinity. And therefore we are God. And what's interesting is that thetan, that life force, is actually quoted that was what brought about Mest. And what's, I'm going straight into the critique here, because we're going to finish this on the last segment. We just kind of make it short.
So remind us of MEST again.
Is that MEST is matter, energy, space and time.
Yep.
And so
we took part in the creation.
Yeah, we as Thetan, as this life force in us, brought forth MEST, and yet MEST is the mess. So you have divinity creating the mess. And I think this is where the system really collapses in terms of its view of God, is that we are each our own divinities. And later in some of Hubbard's, I think it's either a video lecture or it's in his pamphlets, he actually says there are many levels of gods, different gods, and we're all our own, a part of that. And that, I'm forgetting where we're going there.
Where the system collapses is where you were.
Yeah. So we're all sharers in the divine nature, uniquely and individually, and yet we're subject to error. We're subject to the abuse down the street, or we are the abuser or the abused. We're the ones who are lying, and so what you have here is the common pantheism error, which is where you can't separate God from the sinful behaviors of humanity. Right. And so I think this is a real fundamental thing that I think in witnessing to people who are in Scientology, to really get them to see that the beauty of the gospel is that God came for us, to redeem us, and to save us from our transgressions, to restore creation, not to suppress these things and pretend like they're just neurons firing wrong in our brain or synapses. But there is a real problem, and God has come to reconcile that and restore that, where this God is actually the one participating in it. Right? That's a problem. There's no real healing. There's no help there, really, ultimately.
One thing that I find very interesting is there's no way to really distinguish between, so the ills of Scientology being the reactive mind and engramic experiences. There's no way to really distinguish between those things and the goals of Scientology. So if I want to say I want to be clear, how am I able to say that is not being affected by engrams, or that's not being affected by my reactive mind? And we're also assuming that the reactive mind is an ill. It could be, that my axiom, if I'm thinking along Scientology's terms, is that I want to be in the reactive mind and I don't want to be clear. There's not really a way to say that that's not true. So right. even the foundation and the goal are really an inadequate way of looking at
right.
our plight as humans.
Right. Yeah. And that gets into anthropology big time, which we should probably hit on. Let me just read this last thing for divinity here. It's this little paragraph from my notes. It just says, as with Eastern religions and their views on divinity, Scientology provides its members with vague details concerning the nature and character of God, yet it provides enough to disclose its true doctrine of God. God is man and man is God, i.e., it's a proposition of equivalence, that the energy of the mind is divine and vice versa. Scientology.org writes, the concept of God is defined as the urge toward existence as infinity. Get that? We each have this urge towards existence as infinity. We're all divine. That's the end of the day, what they're saying. And it says this is also identified as infinity. In other words, you yourself, that urge in you for survival, is identified as infinity, the very concept of God. You are God. And this, to me, again, is that lie of the serpent from the very beginning. You will be like God if you eat of this, right? This is not anything new. These are demonic, satanic teachings, the fallen angelic community, to get humans to blind them from the goodness of the truth of the gospel, where they'll find ultimate healing, but rather to keep them in bondage, as it says that the devil rolls around like a lion, a roaring lion, and roams around like a roaring lion. So I think, again, just to close on that deity part, is we're basically all a spiritual awakening of infinity is an awakening of the I as the I am at the end of the day. That's what it is at the end of the day, and I think that's why it's so enticing to people, and yet so damaging. We were never meant to be the creator, right? We're created in the image of God. So I just want to let's move on to anthropology and ethics, because you're hitting on the utilitarian ethic there. I think, right?
Yeah.
You can't discern how do you make objective moral claims like on what they're it's.
So what would you say is a primary? How do they think of ethics?
I think let's do anthropology and then ethics.
Okay.
Because I think it's important that we understand the human nature. Why do we exist? For what purpose? I'm trying to find my notes here. Go ahead and keep the mic busy.
Cool.
I look for the notes.
Think of things to say while I look through my notes.
Yeah, please.
So I think in terms of anthropology, so like we already touched on, we are individually we are thetans, we are spirit beings. It's very important. One thing that I find interesting in particular is I've heard from a couple different sources. One academically speaking, this is a kind of Gnostic thinking, where there is a special kind of knowledge to be gained in this group. So when you look at ancient Gnosticism, it's about gaining a special knowledge. That's what Scientology is, because even when you find a mistake or you find something as a Scientologist that seems interesting or seems like there could be a conflict in reason, there's always that bait that I will figure this out once I get to the next level. And so there's no real adequate way to be able to argue between 2 points of worldviews, because for the Scientologist that's not at the highest level, even if you're close to the highest level, you're thinking the real answers are just inches away from me and I will understand this once I get there. That's Gnosticism in its purest form, really, and it systematizes it in a way that's really appealing for Americans and Westerners too. I mean, if you look at the chart, it looks like you're almost playing Dungeons and Dragons. If any of you are nerds out there, it's like you're growing in levels. You're growing in your ability to be a human. It's not just the things that you know. It's also the things that you're able to sense and feel. How are you able to make everything about your body better? But they also have this, I think, another interesting facet that connects itself to Gnosticism is that they tend to disrespect the human body in a particular way, which I'm guessing you're going to get into. So I'll let you take it off.
I finally found my notes. Thanks for filling that was amazing. That was great. You did your research. So the human existence, as we exist as humans, again, it goes back to those two, going back to metaphysics, also applies to the human nature, is that there's a spiritual and an immaterial and also a material aspect. And what's interesting is, here's a quote from Ron Hubbard from one of his early works here. I think this was from this book. But he says, "We know man is a spiritual being inhabiting a flesh body. We don't worry about the cells because man isn't one," right? In fact, we learn later the cells are quite some other beings. But the point here being, like you said with Gnosticism, he's when it comes to his understanding of anthropology, he's very much a Greek, into Greek Gnosticism. And
body is bad,
spirit is bad, spirit is good. And but he's different because it's not like there's a divine spark in us that's getting, he just reworks into this whole nother way. But what's interesting is the immaterial side is pure, right? But what's fascinating is the reactive mind has to be understood as an immaterial aspect, which is strange because the brain he sees as something totally different. That's just physical, and through which the reactive mind and the analytical mind are working with and through. But this is a point I want to make on their anthropology, where I find it to be
troubling,
important, troubling, but this is how they would even view it, and then we can respond to it, is that the person is called the I, or your personhood is the I, and that's your awareness. That's who you are. And the only thing that defines that is awareness. That's the only term. Really.
How is it spelled, by the way? Is it
I?
Just the letter I?
Just the letter I. Yep. And it's really kind of following a lot of the, I think, psychology books.
Okay.
So, but in fact, that's how he grounds his use of I's, because it's just a common thing that everyone's kind of knows now, that the I is the right word to use for the person. But how you define person is just awareness. And then the analytical mind is where we receive the data through the senses, and the analytical mind is one with the I, yet also he distinguishes it from the I, because the I is not the rational thinking part. The rational thinking part is the analytical mind, and then the reactive mind is the one that is old hat that's pushing itself in and giving you bad information. And then there's the somatic mind, which is the mind that actually runs the body's mechanics.
Oh, I haven't
and that's
heard
a
that
mind
one
of its
before.
own
Okay,
too.
really?
So there's three minds, yeah. But what's fascinating then is this goes into their salvation and other issues is that ultimately what makes you as a person isn't the somatic mind, it's not the reactive, it's not the analytical, it's just conscious awareness. So again, going back to the ideas of the Eastern Hindu groups is nirvana. Literally, he's just repackaging it. That for a human, in the existence of being our deity, what it means to be deity is just to be aware of oneself, to be absorbed into yourself. That's the end goal. And
wow,
isn't that fascinating?
It seems so hard that you're able to build a community around this.
Well, I think a lot of people don't grasp a lot of these connections. I think oftentimes you get into something, again, like you said, it's pragmatic. It seems like, if I get clear, I'll overcome those past hurts. I will overcome my mental inabilities because I can have a greater IQ if I get rid of these engrams that are weighing me down. So there's all these promises on the surface level that are at the core of what they're believing is what they're getting into. Like you said, over time, you learn and you discover more things, and one of those is that whether you recognize it or not, you are divine, and the ultimate experience of being freed from your engrams is to get so absorbed into yourself that you don't even really recognize sense data. I mean, you get to the point where you really can't trust anything in life except for being absorbed into this consciousness.
The thing that breaks my heart about this is, and this is an example, I believe, from Dianetics. He was talking about, we talked about this story too. He was mentioning how this boy went, when he got sick, and this is a boy that lived with his parents, but his parents didn't treat him very well. Mm-hmm. So when he got sick, he was sent over to his grandma's house. And his grandma showed him when he was sick, love and affection and so forth. And so engrammatically, his mind taught him that being sick is equated with love. So when in my mind, when I'm reading that, I'm thinking, if I'm a Scientologist and I read that, that would cause me to have so much embitterment toward my family. One, toward my parents for being jerks in the first place, but also to my grandma, who was the one that showed me love and affection. You're going through all your relationships and really analyzing them in such a way that makes having deep relationships almost impossible because everybody has wronged you.
Yeah. Yeah, and see, that's the thing, and which kind of goes more into our last segment is salvation, the understanding that salvation isn't actually dealing and confronting with our families and drawing us together. It's really a just becoming desensitized to it, that it ever happened, so it doesn't affect your thoughts moving forward. And it really does ravage the depths of who we are as image bearers, that we're made for one another, to commune with one another, to experience each other's gifts, and to produce that life between us that binds us. It does the exact opposite, like you're saying. Like you said at the very beginning, in that experiences, people have experienced families being broken apart. Yep. Which shows, one of the tests of a good philosophy, and philosophy just meaning in the general sense of a love for wisdom and a system of life that works, is one of those tests is, does it work? And if you follow it out, you find that it's actually the very philosophy that people are putting themselves into with Scientology is the thing that's ultimately just drawing them away from each other.
One thing that I've heard mentioned passively is that Scientology doesn't recognize the family unit. I find that to be bizarre.
Where was this?
This is just in I think it was a YouTube video with somebody that was recounting their experiences. That in Scientology, because things are built along more along the lines of a hierarchy, like the Navy, or the church and whoever is ahead of you. because there are lots of levels. There are people ahead of you in like David Miscavige's father was telling a story that when he joined the Sea Org, David was well on his way advancing in Scientology, and said that he called his son by his first name, "Hey David," and David Miscavige turns around and says, "You will address me as sir."
Yeah.
And he was punished for that.
Yeah.
So he's one that did leave after about 40 years in Scientology.
Again, it's that you find this sneaking even in like into it's an elitist type mentality, because you're trying to reach this ultimate place of divine experience, and those who are farther up the ladder it's gonna bring about that pride and that arrogance that comes with when our hearts are out of proportion with who we truly are. It's going to produce that ultimate kind of the hierarchy, if you will. I'm farther up, I'm higher up, and that does divide.
Yep.
You're down there. Let's go straight into ethics here, because we did some anthropology, now some ethics. I want to read this quote here. I found it here. You know what's fun is when you can just open up Hubbard's book and just know exactly where the quote is. I spent too much time with this. I need to start reading scripture again. Seriously, for 6 weeks straight, morning and evening, probably all I got into was this, and I didn't do a good job with my daily devotionals. Yeah. Although I was thinking, anyway.
What you'll find out about this guy is that he is relentless with his studies. He's absolutely insane. I think there might be something wrong with him.
Well,
FYI.
It probably is. Probably just the reactive mind. It's the reactive mind. I
Them darn engrams.
Yeah. I'm a slow reader, actually. So it takes me morning and evening, where it takes Jake just morning.
That's because I just listen to everything on audiobook and then go ×2 speed.
I will say that. I will confess. I'm a slow reader, and I draw all over stuff. So it says, I don't know if it makes sense because I'm not reading the full context. I hope it does. In other words, the best solution to any problem is that which brings the greatest good to the greatest number of beings, including self, progeny, family, associates, political and racial groups, and at length to all mankind. The greatest good may require, as well, some destruction, but the solution deteriorates in ratio to the destructiveness employed.
So Xenu is the good guy.
Definitely. I don't know, based on what you shared with us, that he was a good guy there, right? Would they say that?
No, they would say he's the bad guy, but it's just like...
That's what I'm saying. It's right?
Yeah.
But he could have been the good guy, right?
Yeah.
Again, it's subjective. Ethics is subjective here. Mm-hmm. And that's where it's a utilitarian ethic. You could hear right there. Guys like, I think it was Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill are some of the ideas I think Hubbard follows when it comes to that.
When you say utilitarian ethics, can you give us an example of that? And its issues?
Yeah. Well, I think what's fascinating is if you have a biblical grounding in Scripture, if the end goal of life is to love God and neighbor, it works, because you'll be in line with God's will. But basically, it's saying is that the end goal will that brings about whatever one places as the so-called objective truth. However you get there, it doesn't matter as long as you get there. That's a real big summary of it. I mean, here's a little quote I wrote down here. It is the greatest happiness of the greatest number that is the measure of right and wrong. That's utilitarianism. But then you got to ask yourself, like you mentioned, how do you determine what is right and wrong? And does that justify the means of, shouldn't every act be assessed in itself?
Right. Okay. So utilitarianism basically is the ends justify the means.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And you hear that here in his language. I mean, he's saying it may require some destruction to bring about the... So again, divinity is doing this.
Yeah, but you have no idea to be able to... Like, how are you able to say, or can you, as a Scientology, being consistent that Hitler was wrong?
Right.
You know, if he's able to prove that
he could have been clear. He could have been clear. And now we've fatigued. We've gone backwards. Who's to say?
Right.
the system doesn't give you that. So what it ends up being is whoever's in the highest seat of power and authority is the arbiter of truth. And it really that comes down to, it's been told me, I think it was my dad or someone, he made it real simple, said it really comes down to who's the authority. And so that's going to determine your truth. That person or that thing is going to be what it is. And for Scientology, it really is the principles in which Hubbard laid down. Those are the authority.
Makes right.
Yeah, makes right. For what's his name? That god you mentioned, for sure. Xenu?
Yeah, Xenu. He was a galactic overlord.
Oh, okay. Yeah. He probably had an urge to survive, though.
I think so.
So then he's divine, too.
It's true.
Yeah.
He was divine.
Can't escape it. It permeates all of reality.
Yep.
So where are we at on time again?
I don't know.
We're at 25.
Great. Let's. That's good. We did some ethics.
We did some
We
ethics.
did some anthropology. We did some theology.
We did.
Proper. Wow.
Cool. We're cruising
just
along.
good. So yeah, thanks for joining us again.
Yeah, thanks for joining us on this episode, and we will see you for episode 4.
And you can find this book at most used bookstores for probably a pretty penny of $2.
Yeah, that's a hefty price to pay.
Yeah. So for those listening, would you read the title of it?
Battlefield Earth: A Saga of the Year 3000.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
$2.
$2.